everyone, and here we go with the Greetery Lily tutorial. Now in front of me I've got my Tin Holtz glass platform and a blending mat. There's some other things that you need: a thick sponge, some embossing tools, different sizes, and I'm going to use some alternate inks and distress inks. It doesn't matter what inks you use, you could use chalks or gelatos as well. And I've got a blending brush and some ordinary paint brushes, tweezer, silicone glue, and yeah, I broke my glue bottle on the way up to the log cabin. I dropped it and the lid smashed off. The small round pot is Pollen by Flower Soft. So these are the lilies that we're going to make up today. These are the pink ones that I've done before. We're going to make the orange version, but these are done in exactly the same way using Altenew Pink ink. And this is a new one. This is a Stargazer lily, which is done slightly differently. Now we're going to start with the orange one. You get 2 lily dies and a couple of different leaves. And I'm going to be using a plain white piece of paper to lean on, and this is the largest of the lilies. The main large lily piece in the background, if it doesn't have lines on the petal, that's where the extra petal goes. So there's 3 extra petals, 2 little stamens, and there's a variety of leaves. I think there's 4 different leaves. So I have a yellow set from Altenew today, and I'm going to be using the yellow set and the orange set. And I'm going to be using the yellow set and the orange set. I've chosen the lightest yellow, and then I think it's the 3rd yellow of long in this set. And I'm going to colour up the whole of the stamp with my blending brush, so giving it a nice even cover all the way over with my yellow. And I'm going to do this to the main part, and then I'm going to do it to every petal as well. I'm just going to speed this up for you. And I'm adding some yellow onto those little stamens as well. And now I'm taking one of my orange sets. I'm going to take the darkest one. I think it's the 3rd darkest actually in the set. Taking the 3rd darkest in the set. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this colour to the top of the stamens. And then I'm going to add it around the edges of the petals. So I'm not going into the centre, I'm just bringing that into the edges. All the way around. I don't want to blend it in too much, blend it across, but I want the difference between that yellow and then that orange on the outside. So now I haven't changed brushes or cleaned my brush, I'm just switching over to that orange. And these brushes are really controllable, so you can go all the way around the edge. You tilt your brush to an angle, it just catches those edge parts around every petal, and then on the main area of the largest lily piece. Now I've only got 4 of these brushes for all of my colours. So one is my yellows, greens, my yellows, oranges and reds. And then I've got one for my blues. I've got one for purples and then greens. I like to clean them on a baby wipe, so I just take a wet baby wipe and rub my brush over it until it's clean, and then dry it off on some paper towel or just a plain piece of A4 white paper. And if I keep using my brush, I can see that the colour finally fades out. I don't tend to wash them. Okay, so there's my coloured up lily. Now I'm going to take my sponge. Now these are a thick sponge from Wilkinson's. Don't need an expensive embossing mat. And I've got 2 different size ball tools here. I'm using the medium end. Now what you want to do is you want to put your ball tool half on and half on the sponge. So half on your piece of card edge and half on your sponge. And I'm pressing quite firmly and I'm turning those edges in. So I'm working on the back and working all the way around, small circular movements. And I'm going all around those petal edges. You want to spend some time doing this because this makes the flower look a lot more realistic. It gives it a nice shape. And you have to press harder than you think. Now I'm going to take my fine edge, and if you see along the large piece of the lily there's a slit, and I'm just running that small ball tool along the edge underneath that slit just to open it up slightly. I'm just reshaping that back piece because it lost a little bit of its definition when I did that edge, that slit. I'm going to do the same to every lily leaf that I have, so that's 3 leaves. Once again I'm switching to a smaller ball tool because it's a smaller leaf, and you can see it curl up, so it's half on and half off. And then at the base of the leaf I just emboss it the other way so it fits nicely into the slot when we put it together. And the same again, leaf number 2. And our final leaf. Now this one has a little tab on it, and what you want to do is you want to bend that tab back. It's got a little tiny crease line, so I've bent that back, and then I'm just going to firm that down, crease it down with the end of my ball tool. And then I'm just shaping around, same as I did for the other ones, just shaping around the edge to get my nice petal, a nice smooth shape. Now with these stamens, I'm going to just touch the front at the bottom and then on the heads of all the stamens on the back. As I said before, I broke my glue on the way to the craft cabin. It managed to fall off everything that I was carrying up there, and the top has smashed off. So I'm just going to squeeze a bit out onto my white paper, and I'm going to use the pin to actually put my glue on. Now this is the pollen from Flower Soft. I really like this. I have it in this sort of golden amber colour, and I also have it in black for poppies as well. So with my pin, not ideal, but that's what we have at the moment, I'm putting a tiny little bit of white PVA onto the tip of those stamens and then just dipping it into the Flower Soft. It hardly uses anything, but it really makes a nice embellishment on it. This pollen you can use for many flowers, works lovely if you add a bit of brown in with it as well for some flowers. I'm just dipping it in. You don't even notice that you've used any. But once they're on your lilies and stuck into place, they look absolutely lovely. I'm putting the lid firmly back on and putting that well out of the way because you really don't want to sneeze or cough while you're handling Flower Soft. So there's all our lily parts all ready to be assembled. Now the last thing I'm going to do before we assemble is I'm going to put some of my darkest orange ink onto my blending mat, and I'm going to spray with a tiny bit of water, and I'm going to take my paintbrush. It's a square paintbrush. Make it nice and wet, make it nice and in that colour. And I'm going to do some splats all the way over my lily. You can see those going on there. So I'm just tapping my wet paintbrush with my ink and water on onto another paintbrush. I'm doing the same for my petals as well. I think this lily is called a tiger lily. And there we go, all our pieces ready to go. Now you can leave those to dry off for a few minutes, it doesn't take too long, but if you're anything like me, I'm going to assemble it straight away. Now I'm using silicone gel. This is a Pinflare silicone gel in one of their syringes. And I'm putting the silicone gel directly where I want my lily petal to go. And I pop the end into the slit. Now this takes a lot of patience. They do pop in and out, and they, as you put the other petals in, they come back out again. And you'll put this on in about 3 or 4 times and it'll come back out again. But when you fiddled around with it and got it in place, it's worth it in the end. So that's petal number 1. Our next petal is the one over to the right. Now I was seeing if I could connect the two together here and then place them as one, but no, that doesn't work. So this petal goes over to the right hand side, and I'm going to do the same again by placing my silicone onto the larger lily piece. Popping it into that slit at the bottom and then laying my petal in place. Once you've done it, don't forget to check the other one to see if it's still in the right position. Now the last one and the trickiest one to get in is the bottom one. For that, I'm just putting a little bit of white glue onto the tab. Now this petal fits at the front, middle section at the bottom. The tab goes into the slot. So as you push it into the slot, the other 2 lily petals move. But it's fine. We're in isolation. We've got ages. You can open that slit up a little bit more, pop your tab in. and then push your petal down. Now I'm just finding the position of everything there, and I'm going to put some silicone gel to secure that little one down at the front. The last thing we need to do is pop in our little stamens. And I've put a tiny bit of white glue on the bottom. And I'm just going to gently pop those in the slot where I want them to be. You can use 1 or 2 stamens, it's entirely up to you. I think the design actually says 2. Some I've made with 2, some I've made with 1. It's entirely up to you. This one we've just popped 2 of those little things in. And my daughter was cutting these out with me yesterday and described them as frog feet. So you can tweak everything and bend everything into position where you want it. Make sure that little piece is down at the front. Make sure everything is where it's supposed to be before you leave it to dry. You can add your leaves. Just add in some green to those leaves and shaping them the same way as we did the petals. And just popping them behind the lily with a little tiny bit of white glue. And these look great on your cards, all nicely layered up. At the end of the video, we'll show you some cards that have been made using these lilies. So that's the tiger lily one. And we're going to move on and make the stargazer lily. Now what you can do is cut these lilies out of all different cardstock as well. Obviously you can cut them out of patterned, plain cardstock, coloured cardstock, and then you could use some chalk just around the edges to add your colours. Now I'm going to use some Distress Oxides, which is Worn Lipstick and Barn Door. And this is the other type of lily that we have. And this time we have 4 petals to add. 2 at the front, a larger one at the top left, and one that curls over on the top right. Now I'm going to make this in a slightly different way. I'm going to be using my blending mat. So I'm going to place some of my pink Distress ink down, and then my red. I'm going to take a spritzer, my water spritzer. Now this is just plain water and I'm just doing one quick squirt of that. And a fine paintbrush. Now the stargazer lily is generally white around the edges and then pink up the middle of each petal and then darker pink to red down at the bottom. So starting from the bottom, I'm going to flick my colour up the middle of each petal. Yeah, it's trickier on the tiny ones, but we're starting at the base of the petal, flicking away from myself. Now you can do this with watercolour, you can do this with Copics, any alcohol markers you've got, exactly the same way. Many different mediums you can use on these. I'm just grabbing some of that colour, it's watered down Distress Oxide ink. And I'm going to do the same to the main piece. So I'm starting from the centre, working away, tiny little flick brush marks of that lighter pink. Now I know some of these petals are going to get covered up by our petals that are going to go on top, but I like to paint the whole flower. Sometimes you can see underneath the petals because we're raising it up with silicone gel. I'm doing the same again for all of them, starting from the centre, flicking away with that colour, grabbing some more of that colour and then flicking away at the centre of each petal. There are some small detailed groove lines in the petals, so it's quite easy to do. This will look really good with coloured pencils as well, watercolour pencils. Now I'm going to go back to my first one. I'm taking some of the pink and then some of the red, just darkening down the centre, the base and then the centre of each of those petals. And I'm going to do the same for each one. So I'm just going to speed this up slightly for you. So now they're all nicely coloured up, I'm going to do what I did before. I'm going to take my paintbrush and I'm going to take the smaller one this time, add some colour to it because I want tiny dots, but the Stargazer Lily has very fine detailed dots on it. The best thing to do is have a photograph next to you so you can actually see what the lilies look like that you would like to create. So I put in some of those darker dots, grabbing some of the red and the pink together and putting some of those dots on the main lily background and then all over those petals. So I'm just finishing off my lily there. I'm going to shape it as I did before on the orange one. I'm just going to speed this up because you've seen it already. It's exactly the same way. And then I'm going to fix my lily together. Exactly the same, putting the silicone on first. And I'm just colouring up those stamens and adding my flower soft and popping those in. And there's our lily, there's our Stargazer lily. Now I'm just going to add some more dots to that. I do like adding these. I like adding these to the backgrounds of my cards as well. It means that you can colour match a background to the piece that you're placing on the front of your card. Especially if you haven't got the right colour cardstock. Some ink splashes do wonders for a background, lifting your image off the page. And there we go, there's our little lily. I hope you've enjoyed my tutorial. So many different lilies that you can create, and that's the Greetery die. They are a US based company, but really helpful, really friendly. And the dies and the stamps come wonderfully packed. Happy crafting! Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see our updates and new videos. And lots more video tutorials already on there.